because we're one of the highest taxed provinces in Canada.
Yeah.
Where's that money going?
And I asked the same question, where's all that money going? I'm probably the least political politician there is. I'm one that runs on, if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. And we're elected to be representatives of the people of New Brunswick. So, yeah. This is not a rescue plan, it is a control plan. History shows us clearly that when a government attempts to micromanage markets, especially essential commodities like fuel, the outcome is almost always the same. Costs rise, scarcity increases, efficiency plummets. New Brunswick farmers are feeling the stress. Groceries will go up, construction materials will go up, business costs will rise, and inflation will creep in. We started with talking about the local food and beverage strategy and numbers there, and we've jumped all over the place. We've seen a 24% increase in vegetable productions, 41 new greenhouses to promote year-round growth. Grow NB, buy NB, feed NB.
Margaret Johnson, you're the MLA for Carlton Victoria, former Minister of Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fisheries in New Brunswick. You were first elected in 2020. You served as a minister under Premier Blaine Higgs.
You got it.
And focused on sustainability, soil health, local food security. You're a retired teacher and a lifelong resident of Carlton County and deeply involved in your community, and now serve as the official opposition critic for social development and seniors.
Right. And I am the opposition house leader, which means I'm the cat wrangler on our side of the house.
So I'd like to talk a bit about your time as the Minister of Agriculture.
Sure.
Because you, as long as I've known you, I mean, we've met in passing, we've spoken in passing, but we've never had an opportunity like this to be able to sit down and talk at length.
Right.
What was your draw, or what has been your draw for supporting agriculture in New Brunswick?
So first of all, you got to let the listeners know that I am not an expert on farming. I'm not an expert on agriculture. I was given the portfolio, and agriculture is something I'm very passionate about, was even before I got into this position because of where I live. I live in the heart of potato country on the St. John River Valley in Florenceville, Bristol, overlooking the river, much like you do, a different river. But it was the passion came from supporting the people who work so hard to put food on our tables. And I think for years we heard people talk about, oh yeah, poor farmers, they're having it rough, and always said in a sarcastic way, tongue in cheek, that sort of thing. And people really have no idea what goes into getting that crop to survive, and getting that crop to table, and the hurdles that farmers have to jump over and hoops they have to go through just to get to where they can have something that there's. Nobody is getting into farming to get rich. I think Jeremy Clarkson has done a brilliant job of showing that with his Clarkson Farm series in the UK. And I remember when COVID came on, and I had both kids living at home with us, they really enjoyed being able to watch that with me, saying, well, these are the same things you talk about. I said, yeah, because they're farmers and they're going through, it doesn't matter where you are. I visited Germany recently, and farmers over there are going through the same things. So I think it's making sure the public has an awareness of how hard it is to bring the food that they take for granted out of their grocery stores, how hard it is to bring it there. And I think it's to promote and applaud the people who do work so hard.
Are some of those problems and hoops to jump through legislative? Like, are those things that farmers are having to deal with to be able to, on the government side of it?
Well, there's now you're testing me here. I have to go back and think, are there things legislative? Well, I guess there are, yes, okay, we'll say there are, because you've got a lot of, there's a lot of regulations, especially when we're dealing with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. There are a lot of things with regard to biosecurity. There are...
So is that an issue, the federal versus provincial stuff? Like, is there some butting of heads there? Because I spoke to Richard about that last week, about the CFIA, and it doesn't seem like, yes, there are CFI regulations, but I think a lot of it comes down to public health, does it not, with regards to the province?
Well, yeah. So there's all it's a multi-siloed situation. We've got public health looking at that sort of stuff. We've got CFIA who are looking at pest management. You've got I know the farmers out west talk about the fact that they've got pesticides that are being pulled from the shelves that they're not allowed to do because they're going to affect another species which is invasive, and it's not indigenous, but because it's a species that they're concerned about, the farmers are having to pay the price for that. So I think it's oftentimes frustrating, and I think if you talk to Minister Finnegan, he would say, I don't think things have changed much in a year, that it's a real juggling act, and it can be very frustrating, especially when you're trying to help a farmer and you're trying to help an individual, and you're dealing with I can help them with the provincial, or could help them with the provincial regulations and the provincial hurdles, but then I have to deal with the federal hurdles as well. And I would suggest the farther up the food chain you go, the more rigid the rulings are.
What do you mean by further up the food chain?
So at a municipal level, there's flexibility. There might be flexibility. It's a little less flexible if you're at the provincial level, and at the federal level, it's even more. It's even more inflexible when it comes to bending rules and that sort of thing.
Is it making it hard then for people to bring food to? I just see it as we've got a problem not only across Canada but in New Brunswick with regards to food security, and I feel that there's trouble with getting food to market. Like the hoops that we have to jump through to talk to public health to be able to say, okay, we want to bring X to the market. What do we need to do?
Sure.
What do we need to have?
Sure.
And so is that then increasing food insecurity in New Brunswick, making it difficult for people to be able to access good food? Because we spoke earlier off camera about the price of food is getting outrageous. So more and more people want to support their local farmer or barter. So are those barriers really doing more harm than good?
Well, I think we've got such there is such a sense of dread when it comes to disease and infection now, and what can we do to mitigate that and be proactive in those respects. So I think they're looking at they're being very, very uber conscious and uber conservative in terms of how we're going to allow, what regulations we're going to put in place to protect the people from disease. And I think we've become a very litigious society. And so a lot of that, I believe, stems from that as much as food security concerns from public health. I think people are very concerned about the litigious nature of some dear soul like yourself who's got a market garden and a few chickens and a pig and a cow, and you're selling meat and then you get listeriosis and it's traced back to your farm. And then not only does it become a court battle, but it becomes something that could conceivably end your operation. And I think those are the things that they're trying to avoid with these regulations. But you're right, it does slow things down and makes it. I talked to a fellow the other day and he says, I love the work, I love the business, I just hate the BS. And you didn't get into farming to become a perfecter at paperwork. So that's the frustration.
And I think that's the struggle too for a lot of young farmers wanting to get into it, because there are people like myself, we love growing food, but we've invested this 100% of our own money, no grants, no outside funding. So we've really just put our passion.
And you'd be hard pressed to find them if you did.
Well, not only that, but I spoke to another farm last year that they said they'd love to, and they know they're available because you speak to organizations like the Young Agrarians and the National Farmers Union, and they post about them all the time. But I'm so busy growing food that I can't afford, one, to hire an accountant or a grant writer or somebody to be able to go out and find that $1,000. Because realistically, it's rarely any large sum of money, but it'll end up being $1,000 that you can toss towards seeds or a new greenhouse or help towards that.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about, I know when we were looking at the local food and beverages strategy, one of the big things, and you know this as well as I do, I think the last number we checked at was we're self-sufficient to the tune of 7%. Maybe it's higher than that. Maybe it's 9% now for fruits and vegetables in the province of New Brunswick. For vegetables. So we've done a great job with potatoes. We can have potatoes till the cows come home. Blueberries were great. Apples were super. But then we look at things like carrots, and we're looking at peas. The St. John River Valley used to be a great place for growing when McCain's first started 50 years ago. There were pea fields and bean fields, and those things were all processed right in Florenceville. And then once for one reason or another, and I would never entertain why those things happened, but it became less financially successful for them to do that, so they switched those crops to strictly potatoes. So as a result, though, we don't have that giant accessibility to that sort of non-potato vegetable. So you've got to trust on if you want to have it local. And my family would tell you, to this day, I drive them nuts. My young people, who are both close to 30 now, still refuse to get groceries with me, because since I took this on, I will go to the grocery store if the carrots come from Mexico, and I'm just like, we won't buy carrots today. And I'm a little more lenient when it comes to the maritime provinces. If there's nothing from New Brunswick, well, I might get something from Nova Scotia or PEI, but it grieves me no end to go into a store and to see in Carlton County 2/3 of a potato rack devoted to PEI and USA potatoes. I'm like, really? Why? So I'm sorry, I'm going in circles. I'm kind of like a squirrel on a wheel here. So we talked with the local food and beverage strategy about how we could increase that vegetable sector. One of the things is we need to improve controlled environment agriculture. We need to make interior growth, year-round growth, something that is accessible and affordable. And right now it's not, because unless you're doing something that's starting, say, February, and you're seeding, there's a lovely little operation down in Durham Bridge where they've been quite successful in banking their greenhouse and not having internal heat, and seeding in February, and then by the spring things are coming up, and they're keeping it's warm enough that it can be generated by the solar energy that keeps. But for the most part, controlled environment agriculture requires an external heat source. Well, we don't have affordable geothermal. That's a whole other ball of wax to get into. Propane is exorbitant. It's another fossil fuel, so there's feelings about that. Some people have tried it with pellet stoves and wood heat. It's just the heating part of controlled environment is really cost prohibitive. And I will hear ad nauseum from people who talk about, well, Quebec does this and Quebec does that. Quebec does a whole pile of things, and they heavily subsidize, and we just can't keep up. We don't have those programs in place that Quebec has. So, but we want to make sure that we could create cooperatives. And I know Food Dépôt Alimentaire has a great program going where they're, we talked to Blair Hislop with Creddles in Hampton and Sussex with his Mrs. Dunster's operation about creating a collective. So if we had stores that could say, I need to have 10,000 kg of carrots, because part of the big challenge with getting it to market is that's sustainable, that consistent supply, right? So I need to be sure that I can get 10,000 kg of carrots every year. Can you do it? Well, the neat part about carrots is they can be kept. So that's great. We have cold storage for them. That's good. But we needed to find a way to create a collaborative grouping so that we had a whole bunch of farmers come on board and say, yeah, I'm willing to do that. Yeah, I want to. So you've got a collective that creates that sustainable, consistent supply of that vegetable. And we're not there yet.
That almost sounds like it goes against the current discourse of we're talking about the interprovincial trade and knocking down barriers. But if we want New Brunswick to become self-sufficient, well, we could bring things in from Quebec, like you're saying. They have different regulations, different subsidies. They have the ability to be able to do that. But New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, we don't.
And there are some parts of the interprovincial trade barrier reduction that people just go, that's not necessarily as good for us, because we've done a really great job of saying, no, we're not going to, especially in the seafood industry. So let's not get into that. Let's stick with farming. It's another ball of wax.
I'm not familiar with aquaculture, so we can't really dive into that. But it's been something that, I was the exact same way. When I went to the grocery store last year and saw garlic from China, I was like, why do we have garlic from China? I know Connors is like a few kilometers from here, and they grow tens of thousands of heads of garlic.
Right.
There's no need of this.
And so much of it is making sure the market knows that the local product is available. Because if I live in Northampton, I don't know that Ben Cummings has a great market garden or that he's taking his produce to the Woodstock Farm Market unless he's a guy that has a great little blog that he's on social media and that sort of thing. So making sure that they have that market access is huge, and making sure that the advertise. And I believe that the marketing department at the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fisheries is very good at that. There are some very skilled professionals in the marketing department who are very eager to help people who want to enter into that sector.
So how do we move forward then to be able to grow that percentage of fruit and vegetables that we were able to get here in New Brunswick?
Well, I think the biggest, you and I talked briefly before we came in, and one of the biggest challenges is, I'm going to loop in my young farmers into this, because I think that's the secret to sustainable agriculture in the province, is making sure we have young farmers continuing to enter it. And what's happened over the years is I touched the microphone. What's happened over the years is we've had farmers aging out. I think the average age is 52.
56.
Is it 56 now? See, now that's just in 4 years. So 56 is the average age of the farmer in the province. And so it's very difficult when you look at families who've been brought up in that environment, good, honest, salt of the earth people, but they see that dad and mom are up at dawn. They're working their tails off until dusk. Dad's looking over piles of bills and fertilizer and seed costs and fuel costs and everything that goes into getting that crop in. And there's not a lot of young men and women who are eager to get into that. There's not a lot of them that are ready to pick up the reins and say, this farm is going to be an and son or and daughter, a family farm, because they see what's gone into it and they see the blood, sweat, and tears that it's taken to make it a successful operation. So what happens, you don't have heirship. So then that property becomes sellable. So what happens, and this is where it kind of makes me crazy, because people say, oh, these big farms are killing us, big farm. Well, you're not going to let arable, beautiful land sit there and do nothing. If it's going up for sale, who's going to buy it? Another farmer. And the good news is that keeps that land in production. That keeps fruits, vegetables, whatever you want to grow on there, into the market of New Brunswick. But what it does, it makes it very, very difficult. The cost of land makes it very, very difficult for young farmers. I'd say it's the greatest impediment for young farmers to get into farming. Which is why when we look at projects like when we talk about what McCain's are doing with regenerative agriculture, and we talk about crop rotation and livestock amendments, organic amendments to the soil versus chemical fertilizers and that sort of stuff. We talked about if you had a young farmer who wanted to get into livestock, but he doesn't have grazing land. So then we need to find a crop farmer who says, well, I'd like to have the amendments to the soil, and we need to create cooperatives again. I sound like I'm creating this wonderful touchy-feely commune type thing, but it's cooperative, I think, is the key word. We have to be able to have a young fellow who says, I've got 30 head of cattle and you've got X number of acres. Can I graze on this fallow land on the season that you put this out fallow? Can I graze my cattle on your field for this season? Well, that's a win-win. Farmer's getting the supplement to the soil. Young man or young woman is getting the grazing land for their animals, and they don't need to worry. All they need to do is a lean-to or a shelter where they're going to be protected from the elements, right? I think those are the things we need to start exploring. Those are the things we need to look at. We also need to look at, I know the FLIP program is one that while I was in office, we looked at revamping. Because right now what it does, it protects land from taxation if it's being used for agriculture for 20 years. Now what happens is and you re-register it if that 20 years expires. So what happens is, you're 80 years old, you own 100 acres, and you die, and none of your sons or daughters are interested in the land to farm. They like the house. Yep, we're going to keep the house, but that land sits fallow for all that time. And it still has the benefit of taxation from the flip program, but it's not in use.
So it's tied to the property, not to a person.
Correct. So if there was a way to put that land into use and bring it back into the sector through leasing or a different mechanism or incentive or tax benefit rather than the current one. And I know that the department and the Department of Treasury is also exploring how to do that. Now, I know they're not there yet, but those are things that might bring land into the hands of young farmers. I'm hopeful. Cost is huge. The cost of land is huge. We've seen what the real estate market's been like. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that a 3-bedroom bungalow would go for $400,000 in the province of New Brunswick. But with that comes arable land as well. The cost of arable land has gone up as well.
You mentioned subsidies in Quebec. Mm-hmm. Why does New Brunswick not have similar subsidies?
I can't answer that.
Because we're one of the highest taxed provinces in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Arguably, our medical system needs work, needs help. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of infrastructure in New Brunswick that needs help. And I don't want to say that we should go and lean on, like, we shouldn't have a 2-tiered system for medical, and then it gets dangerous when you start to go to the private sector versus public sector. But where's that money going?
It's right now it's a very, very difficult question for me to answer, because I question how we can be so many hundreds of $millions in debt and yet see each of our departments having to take cut after cut after cut. And I ask the same question: where's all that money going? And it's something that we should definitely be digging into. And I think we've only been out of power for 6 months. So we've tried to dig into some of those things, and we will continue in opposition to do that, because we've got to, one of the chief, and I certainly didn't intend to make this a political platform, Ben.
You're a politician, so it kind of...
Yeah, but I'm probably the least political politician there is. I'm one that runs on, if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. And we're elected to be representatives of the people of New Brunswick. So yes, you're running under a banner. Yes, you're purporting a certain philosophy. But once you're in there and once you're elected, you've got to be working for the people. And if the people are in need, then you're there to help them with those needs. So if we talk about a government that's purporting to be full transparency, then we need to get that transparency at all levels, and we need to get those answers.
Let's go to the other side of food production.
Yeah.
Food security. Mm-hmm. I spoke with our local food bank, I think 2 years ago now, it might have been last year, with regards to the number of people that are frequenting the food bank. And she said that it was increasing by hundreds every month.
Mm-hmm. When I was in there last, 25% increase. And of that 25%, the vast majority were seniors. When was the last time we saw an increase to pension checks above cost of living? Our seniors have been the backbone of our nation, and this is where the tax dollars have come from for 50, 60 years. And yet they're the ones in greatest need right now.
And on top of that, we see something like across the country, 58% of food goes to waste.
Right. And when we look at people like, or organizations like Greener Village, I got very, very, very cross this season, or this last spring term in the legislature, when the Department of Health announced that they were going to bring cuts to food dépôt alimentaire and the food banks. And I'm like, my Lord, they're asking for, they operated on with 2 million. They need 3, and you're going to cut them back to 1. I'm like, this is just not making sense. It's just not making sense at all. And if have you been down to Greener Village?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, Ben, you got to get in there. They've got such an amazing plan. First of all, you're looking at people who are, we've got a society that has grown up with parents who are working 2 jobs, both parents working 2 jobs. We've got kids who are not, mums and dads are coming home, supper's on the table, then they're running to sports and that sort of thing. Taking the time to teach them how to can, how to quilt, how to knit, how to make dinners, how to get the biggest bang for your buck out of turkey. Those things, those skills have been,
We've talked about that plenty.
they're gone. We found out when I first took this job on, Jane and I were talking to the food bank in Perth Andover, and they were exasperated because at Christmas time there's this huge turkey drive. You'll hear organizations, the Lions, the Kinsmen, they do all these wonderful turkey drives to bring people who are underserviced a turkey for Christmas. Number one, this is from the food bank. Number one, they would say not a lot of them have got a fridge or a freezer that can accommodate thawing it. They don't know how to. They've never been told how to thaw it safely.
Yeah.
And what they said they were finding was people were cooking the turkey, having it one meal and throwing it out. So we took Jane and I, my constituency assistant has a background in nutrition. And so we took the time to make a series of videos, and we cooked the turkey and we served the turkey and we did the traditional turkey thing. Then we boiled the carcass down, showed people how to make stock, and then we showed people how to make soup, showed them how to make gravy and gluten-free gravy if they were so inclined. And then we talked about making turkey casseroles. I mean, in my house, you were glad when the turkey was gone, right? Because you had hot turkey sandwiches, and then you had turkey tetrazzini, and you had turkey pot pie, and there were 150 different ways to make turkey. But we haven't taught that to our families. And so this group, going full circle, back to Greener Village, they've got a teaching kitchen. And so part of their program was bringing people in and showing them how to cook these the produce, and how to can, and how to preserve, and how to get your best bang for your buck out of the turkey. But they also have this initiative taking food that is just past prime or on its way to past prime and repurposing it. Process it, freeze it, put it in casseroles, make soups, and have that available in the food banks as well. So that would be a worthwhile visit for you to go down there and visit them. It's just on the old road on the way to Moncton on the north side. If you cross the Princess Margaret and head down there to Greener Village, fantastic. It's I would say it's the benchmark in the province. They're doing great work, but their funding has been cut. So how can we make sure that those things are not only enhanced and encouraged, but duplicated? Because if it can be done here in Fredericton, why can't it be done in Woodstock? And Woodstock's food bank has got a phenomenal teaching kitchen there too. So it's a matter of getting the help to put the programs in place to make people feel like they can stand on their own 2 feet. Nobody wants to go to the food bank feeling like they're begging for food, begging for clothes. If you went with that stigma, how dehumanizing is that to the human spirit?
Yeah.
So you want to make a situation where people are getting skills to look after themselves. Teach a man to fish. That's what it's all about, right? You got to teach a man to fish, and then he can feed himself. Teach a man to grow, then he can feed himself. Teach him how to look after his family. He can do it without government intervention.
Is that something you believe is important?
Yes, I do. I do believe. I'm very cautious when I say that I'm a socialist. But there are things I think we have to do. I'm not saying we have to. We've got a number of programs in place which were created as safety nets, which have now become lifestyle choices. And I think we've got to get away from that. I think we've got to make people empowered. People have to know that they can stand on their own 2 feet and not have to ask the government for help. And listeners will maybe not like the next line, but Premier Higgs said, "We are not a bank. The government is not a bank. We are not a primary lender." And it's true. It shouldn't be. It should be there to encourage and enhance programs that are innovative and support programs that are for those who can't get on their feet again. But we've got to give people the tools to get on their feet themselves so that they can grow their own. You would have the statistics more than I would. How many people, once COVID came on board, and I'm so glad we don't have to bring COVID into a conversation, but it's like, instead of BC, it's BC is before COVID sort of thing. So how many people have started their own gardens? How many people have gone to preserving? How many people have learned how sourdough bread? The incidence of people learning how to make sourdough bread has gone exponentially. Everybody's got a bottle of feeder in their fridge. And isn't that wonderful? Isn't that glorious? We've got some amazing groups like the Women's Institute who are losing momentum in the province just because the population that is involved is aging. But what an opportunity we're missing by not getting those people working with our young people and showing them, well, this is how you make strawberry jam for your peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. This is how you can make preserves. This is how you can make salsa and not have to pay paste picante to make it for you. Make your own, grow your own herbs, grow your own tomatoes. One of my kids is on her own now, and she's so excited because she's got a row of tomato plants on her balcony in her apartment, and she's making her own tomatoes. She's growing her own tomatoes, and she's going to make her own salsa, and that's what it's all about. It's giving people that sense of accomplishment that I can feed myself. And I'm not talking about people who are Bear Grylls. They're not living in the woods. You don't have to go off grid completely. I'm just talking about feeling good about being able to sustain yourself and your family and knowing that this is something I've been able to do without the help of anybody else.
How do people do that with the lack of time availability?
Yeah, right.
That's something that we've been toying with because we've talked about, like, okay, can we make a 30-minute dinner in an Instant Pot, in a crock pot, whatever?
Right.
Because so many people, like you mentioned, they're rushing off to school, rushing off to sports, or parents are working 2-3 jobs. They are not home and able to throw a meal on.
So what's the question? How do we do that?
How do people find the time to be able to do those things?
Okay, so I think there are a lot. Employers have become a great deal more flexible, and this is not fair to say because this tends to be with office jobs and things like that. People who are working in public service, and by that I mean working in grocery stores, working in fast food restaurants. If you're dealing with the public yourself, you typically don't have that time. It's much more difficult. But employers are being much more flexible in terms of working from home. So I think that's helpful. But I think in communities, I think it's part of the community planning mandate, or should be part of the community planning mandate, that we create spaces within communities for growing opportunities. I think that community gardens, Moncton is a great example. I think I visited 3 different community gardens down there where they had, I think it was $10, we'll say, was what the fee, and that could be completely wrong, but you had your plot and you grew your garden for the summer, and that was yours to do with as you wished. You could grow rutabaga, you could grow carrots, you could grow your salsa garden, whatever you wanted. That was your plot. And then a percentage of that square footage was allocated for the farm market as well, or not for the farm market, the food bank. So if you have that in locations around the city, that provides people a way of feeding themselves healthy, nutritious produce. And I think that when we look at the local governance reform, I think when we're looking at expanding our neighborhoods and building, the need for housing in our area, in the province, is incredible, as you well know. But I think in the building plans, we need to incorporate that growing opportunity as part of it.
Do we need to increase societal trust within communities as well to be able to allow for that? Because years ago, you would have had people going to church, you knew each other, going to the same events, whatnot. Now, I feel we're more connected than ever, but more disconnected than ever. We no longer have the community of, oh, I saw my butcher at church on Sunday, or I
Right.
saw my baker at my son's baseball game. Like,
Right.
it's so disconnected that we don't have the friends and community that we used to.
And we're highly suspect of those outside our little circles. And that's another challenge. You're right. I mean, in your neighborhood, I live on a wonderful rural road, and 40 years ago, I would have known everybody on that road. I would have run out of sugar and had no trouble running across the street and saying, so and so, can I get a cup of sugar for you? I'm in the middle of making a cake. And we don't have that anymore. We don't have that sense of. I said, I have this great vision of going back, and this is going to sound so schmaltzy, and you're going to think I'm so weird, but I have this vision of rebuilding the 1950s neighborhood. I think that that's what we have to start going back to, especially when we're looking at these tiny homes. We need to get on board with, first of all, we've got to create regulations, and we've got to get some sort of standard for what is a tiny home, and we've got to start looking at how we can create affordable housing for people. But within that, we have to have places that are rebuilding neighborhoods where kids can have a common place to play, and everybody has a garden in their back or front yard. And I think we've got to try and reestablish that trust, because we've become so suspect of each other and so insular. And
What's caused that?
gosh,
Because, like
I
you
don't know.
said, 40 years ago, you would have known everybody on your
Yeah,
street.
yeah.
So what's changed? The people have moved. It's different people, but
I think the speed of our life. I had a minister once who said, Margaret, and you can appreciate, I run at a pretty fast clip. He said, Margaret, you have to remember that we are human beings, not human doings. And I have to remind myself of that that's why I took the morning off to mow my lawn and putter around my house. Because we have to stop, and we're running at such a clip to get everything done and to keep up with each other. I thank God every day that I live in the province of New Brunswick and in the Maritimes, because we have at least got the benefit of a slower pace than we do in other provinces, where things are very fast and very much, you got to drive the right car, you got to have the right flowers on your deck, you got to have the right driveway, you got to go to the right vacation place. Oh Lord, give me strength. Just live, right? We've got to learn how to live, and we are so intent. And I'd be the first to admit, I did it with my kids. In the summertime, we had soccer, we had softball, we had baseball, we had swimming, and run. In the winter, we had dance, we had hockey, we had, what was the other thing there? Oh, basketball for a time. Glad we got out of that one. And you were just going. So parents are working till 5 o'clock. They rush home. They find something fast to throw in, or throw a sandwich together. Go to Subway afterwards. They're getting the kids to the event. They come home, make sure the homework's done. It's bang, 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 bang. And we're at such a clip, there's no time to just get out and see what's going on. So run next door and see how George and Wilma are. Check in on Fred, who's 85 years old. I had a dear old soul come up to me once at a pancake breakfast, and he said, Margaret, could we do something about checking in on folks? And I said, what do you mean, Don? And he said, just so people who are living alone, so that they have somebody to check in on them every now and to make sure that he says, it's just awful lonely. And it is. It's terribly lonely for seniors who've lost their spouse or have never had a spouse. The family might live away if they have family. And because of that pace that everybody else is running at, we don't have people checking in on each other. And it's awful that we have to remind ourselves to do that. But that's where we are. And I think that's the biggest burden is the pace and saying, I got to take time to breathe.
Other countries like Europe or in Europe are arguably healthier for being able to take that time. And that time surrounds around food, bringing it back to agriculture and food. Healthier both spiritually, mentally, but then physically, because you take that time. Like Nicole and I are huge foodies. We love food.
Yep.
And we've talked so much about being able to invite people over for a meal of things that we've been able to grow and raise, because that's something you don't see anymore. That's not a community aspect of being able to have over 5 or 10 people for a massive meal of bounty that we created.
And we've had to turn, I don't know if HGTV can take the blame for this or what, but we've had to turn everything into a grand production. And it doesn't need to be a grand production. I've got 3 amazing girlfriends, and we try at least every other month. We have our Maritime Saturday night. And we just send each other texts and say, okay, I'm going to host it this week or this month. And we're going to have baked beans and who's going to bring what. And the most important part is that we're together and we get a chance to sit down and chat. And we just sit around and eat and dip and have a drink and chat. And 9 o'clock, everybody's ready to go home and go to bed. But it doesn't have to be a big production. And people don't invite each other over for dinner anymore. And it's just because, again, going back to that pace. I'm sweating on your camera here.
That's all right. It's hot in the studio. This is why I usually do these in the morning. I agree. I think there's a lot of issues just societally, and I like that you mentioned socialism, because I would arguably be more of a libertarian.
Yes.
I like the government getting out of, like, go away.
Yep.
Mainly because we've had dealings in the past with public health and just, like, trying to sell food. Our biggest thing now has been, we have dairy goats, and we'd love to be able to share
Can't wait to go see them.
We'd love to be able to share our milk or our butter or our cream.
Right. Yep.
I guess that is the CFIA, so it's no use really.
But it's not just the CFIA. That's another one of those ones. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, because that is my foreseen issue, is that there are these stepwise hoops that you need to jump through. And, like, yes, we could open a creamery. It would cost. I talked to a farmer last week. I picked up actually a cream milk spinner, cream maker.
Yes.
From them last week, and he was just saying they looked into starting their own creamery, but it would have cost a minimum of about $40,000 to $50,000. And for somebody who just small scale, you want to sell ice cream on the side of the road at your homestead or whatever, or just sell butter to your neighbor.
Big outlay.
Milk can't leave my homestead.
Right. There's I've been dealing with a wonderful group, Raw Milk New Brunswick, and we tried to get because there's a population, there's a niche market for raw milk in the province, and naturally, they came to the Department of Agriculture because it's milk, right? You'd think that would come out of there. And in fact, that is governed by the Department of Health. So we could never seem to get everybody at the same table in the same thinking space to saying, this is something we need to explore.
Is that just apathy, or it just doesn't fall on people's priority list?
Well, no,
raw milk can make people sick, so we're just
right.
going to...
I think fear is the word that came to the front of my mind, but I think that, it's that uncertainty, that sense of, what are we getting? What can of worms are we opening if we allow this to happen? But I think it's something worth exploring, and it's something we've got to, hopefully by the fall we can get this group together with the minister and have a discussion, priority-wise, of course, with all that's going on in healthcare right now. I'm sure raw milk is low on the list, but we've had people who've said don't sell it on Facebook, don't talk about, neighbors. If your neighbor happens to come and
See, that is
And
the
that's-
exact problem that I have with that, because it's not just that. I've run into that. I talk to people who distill liquor
Yeah.
at home.
Oh, I'm
people
sure.
who sell eggs and baked goods and different things that, like, oh, technically, with regards to the regulations, you can't. We got dinged. We got called last year when we were selling bread because we put up a little video on Facebook of Nicole baking bread at home. We didn't at the time. We were baking at a class 4 kitchen.
okay.
But we got a complaint lodged against us. So the health inspector called us and said, hey, you can't be baking bread at home. We're like, we do bake bread at home, not for the public.
Yeah.
But those are just issues that, yeah, a lot of people will say, just don't post about it. Don't tell anybody that you're selling it. I know somebody, I think it was up in Perth Andover, that used
But
to
why
sell,
are we encouraging people to do nefarious things, right?
instead of introducing
Right.
change to
Right.
legislature.
Right. So that's one I'm hoping we can get to work on. And I would think that goat and dairy, cow milk, I would think that could be covered under the same
Is there any
regulations.
other kinds of milk?
Nothing.
Goat and dairy, goat and cow.
Goat and cow. I've heard of oh yes, there is. There's donkey milk, but I don't think it's human consumption. It's used for things like soaps and such.
Donkey milk?
Yeah, right. There's a lady up in the Perth Andover area, and she sells donkey soap. There's a whole different podcast.
That's appalling to me. That,
I don't know. You'd have to explore that on your own.
no,
Ben.
that's cool.
It's
but-
supposed to be very good for people with eczema and psoriasis and that sort of stuff.
But that is one of the things, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and then talk to political figures, because that is the legislation and laws like that are things that to me seem frivolous. And it's largely just the language. Like these amendments need to be written up. Somebody needs to take account and be able to say, hey, let's change this wording because this wording is too broad.
Right.
Or the,
Well, and I think part of the things too is providing the access to the testing that makes it safe. Making sure that those testing mechanisms, and we've got a wonderful lab down in Fredericton. There's a lab in PEI. There's another one in Ontario. Make sure that there's access to those testing mechanisms so that people can be assuring the consumer as well as the inspection agency that what they're putting out there is a quality, safe product.
because a lot of people who are interested in those things, especially small scale, are concerned about the health of it.
Yeah.
So they want to know that it came from a small dairy, from somebody who, oh, I trust this farmer, and I know that it's not milk in a dirty parlor and it's gross milk covered in feces.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like talking about what farmers, farmers are terrible to the land. They're ruining the land. They're raping the land of this and that. It would not be in any farmer's best interest to do anything to the land which he sustains his livelihood on. So if I have a farmer who has a goat herd and they want to sell goat meat, I mean, we've got a phenomenal operation up in Lakeville, Farron Family Farms, and Karen and Al have got this great goat meat operation, and they're selling goat milk and goat cheese and all that other wonderful stuff. It would not be in her best interest or your best interest to sell a second-rate product, because that is reflecting upon your operation, and thereby your operation doesn't succeed. If you do something wrong or you're not taking care of the product, you're not going to get the demand uptake, and so you're going to just go back to feeding yourself.
that's an interesting point, because there are issues with that. We spoke about earlier off camera with regards to regenerative agriculture, but then also for market, like that, if you're selling one-on-one at your market or selling to people,
Right.
that's fine. But if you are selling to distribution, they can and will penalize you for having potatoes too big, cauliflower too big. Those crops are grown to travel rather than grown to be good, right? You're trying to fit
On a market garden type?
No, just in general for,
Okay.
for large scale
Sure,
production
yeah.
production farming, just back to large scale
We're
production.
into uniformity and all
Yeah,
that
exactly.
stuff. Yeah. I got you now.
So that just becomes an issue then. I 100% agree that it's in no farmer's best interest to be able to destroy their land, but I think it's in part ignorance that in recent years we've learned with regards to different practices, whether it be pesticides or inorganic inputs that are depleting the soil, that it's best to move towards regenerative practices.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that and I think we've learned very quickly that there's a reason why old farmers did what they did. We're all too keen to throw the baby out with the bathwater in the name of progress, and this is a new generation. We know better. I'll give you a prime example. There was a field that I visited, and it was in the spring, and we had a freshet, terrible thunderstorm, and new owner of the land had gone and taken out all the line fences. So they'd taken all those breaks in the pasture to create, or in the cropland to create this wonderful, great big, much easier for the tractor, so it's good. And the freshet came through, and there was a whole new valley made. And I can't tell you the tons of topsoil that were taken off those fields. So you know what? The farmers had those line fences in there for a reason. And I think there are a lot of young farmers now who are listening to the things that their grandfathers did and talking about soil the way their grandfathers did. And I'm sorry to keep saying a very male dominated, but it is still very male dominated.
When it was, yeah,
Right, and it was
yeah.
then. So, I think that looking back to those generations and learning from what was done in the past, I think there's an appetite for that because they're recognizing that we've got to do something. Not to mention the cost. The cost of artificial or chemical fertilizer is atrocious. And shipping it from out west or shipping it from wherever, it's, we realized when the Ukraine crisis developed that, wow, were we going to start paying through the nose? And it was, we had feed costs going up, we had seed costs going up, we had fertilizer costs going up, and we had the carbon tax bringing fuel costs going up. And yet we had the nerve to wonder why the cost of our food was going up. How could it not? How could it not go up with all of that burden being placed upon the people who are trying to grow the food?
Have there been discussions at all with regards to large-scale operations being the grocery stores that buy it? Because I would say that they are where a lot of this food waste comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't want to limit the amount of food that there's already production limits on like chicken and your quota and your dairy quota. I wouldn't want to limit the amount that a producer can grow. But when it comes to growing things and putting it into the market or the grocery stores, has there been discussions on a provincial level of controlling the amount that they buy and the amount of the market that they corner?
I'm not sure I understand the question. You mean in terms of
So let's say
local produce?
I'm trying to do this without saying names. Let's say Superstore buys.
Let's call it the red and white.
Let's say yes, a grocery store, a large national chain.
Yes, there you go.
Buys over 50% of the market share of grown potatoes, carrots
Sure.
in New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
Should that be allowed? Because then they could dictate the price for that produce.
Interesting.
Because I've heard tell of that more in the States than in Canada. But if companies buy the majority of their, or if a farmer sells over 50% or 90% of their food to a certain distributor,
mm-hmm.
they're beholden to that large organization. And large organizations aren't known for their trustworthiness. That's why I like that we've talked about cooperatives and about small markets.
So the first problem is that the struggle with any large grocery chain, and we've talked about this with the Code of Conduct, the Grocery Code of Conduct, which is something that the federal, provincial, and territorial ministers have discussed over the last 4 or 5 years, and we made some gains with that in the last year, signed off on it, I remember.
What is the code
so
of conduct?
it's creating fair prices, making sure that people are getting fair prices for their produce and that sort of thing. So the biggest challenge, Ben, is the red and white chain. There is nothing that says, there is no legislation that says right now that you have to buy any amount from that province. And that's the greatest hurdle, is the fact that the larger the chain, the greater the tendency to buy in bulk to reduce their overhead. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
And it's imports.
right. So that's imports, right? Because it's a whole lot easier to buy tomatoes from Mexico that are coming to be sold in the grocery store in Woodstock or
That then
Lawrenceville.
becomes a problem with regards to the federal government with tariffs and
Right. Which brings me back to my frustration with vegetables when I go to the grocery store and I see, good Lord, we live in Carlton County. Why are we endorsing? I've got to go see my kids in the island next week. I must visit a grocery store over there and see how many New Brunswick potatoes are sold in PEI. I dare say there won't be many. And I just, it's a battle, and I have talked to several large chains during my time as minister and said, you guys got to get on board. We got to really bring New Brunswick produce to our New Brunswickers. And I can remember when Walmart opened their giant distribution center in Dieppe, and I met with the president, and that was one of the things we were really pushing for then. And he did assure us that he was going to be bringing New Brunswick produce into the store. So I check regularly, and they've done a fairly good job. But we need to stay right on top of these large chains to make sure there's a code of conduct that says we are supporting Canadian, we are supporting regional, and we are supporting provincial. If in the province of New Brunswick you're not carrying New Brunswick potatoes, there's a problem. If in the province of New Brunswick you're not carrying New Brunswick blueberries, there's a problem. Apples are a little different because a lot of the apples get sent to a central spot in Nova Scotia, and so it might say it was packaged in Nova Scotia, but they're actually apples that came from Cocan, so that's a little trickier. But we've got to start protecting, and that's where the interprovincial trade barrier stuff gets shaky for me, I think. But we've worked so hard to really promote and establish these local food and beverage strategies that are going to enhance and promote and encourage New Brunswick fruits and vegetables and produce and protein. So are we going to lose all of that if we open the doors and let everything in? I don't know. I know dairy and cheese is a big thing because you can only bring so much cheese across the Nova Scotia border now. So if those tariffs go off, and if those barriers go off, then I guess that can all come into the province again. But it would be nice if it was beneficial to New Brunswick. And I'm hoping it will be. I'm hoping they're going to find a way. I think our craft alcohol people are going to find some more market access. I hope that it gives market access to all of our other products as well.
It's a hard conversation to have because you look at the United States, and the states have relative autonomy against the federal government there. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Canada, we're a hierarchy as opposed to the autonomy of the individual provinces. So establishing that, whether it's as a tourism destination or as food and beverages, it makes it really difficult for those producers to be able to actually bring that to market.
Yeah. Well, and with the craft alcohol as well. I mean, they've struggled so long and so hard to try and get market access here in our own province, to get shelf space, because the big four brewers have got they've got the access that and have had, because it's easy to go in and buy a case of Budweiser. It's easy to go in and buy a case of Moosehead. It's easy to go in and buy a Coors or whatever, and that's what people are carrying out. So it's supply and demand. So I just hope that we can really work with those the Association for Craft Alcohol Producers. I hope we can work with them to make sure that they're gaining further access for their products as well. Because that's farming too. They're using local
hops
products
and grains,
right?
and
right.
yeah, there's some excellent
and there were there were incentives if you're using X, Y, and Z that come from New Brunswick, then you're a New Brunswick made. I remember Kevin Arsenault, who's you should meet Kevin Arsenault too if you want to talk. He's a great member of the NFU, former MLA from Kent County, and he was always saying there is no distinction between produced and made, because you can make it in New Brunswick, but have it come from anywhere. And he said, we really have to make a distinction between those things when we're, yeah.
That makes it hard, especially with clever marketing tactics. Things like assembled in Canada rather than made in Canada.
Well, we saw that with the whole elbows up phenomenon. Suddenly there were maple leaves on every product on the grocery shelf. And like, that's not made in Canada. It's all marketing. It's all marketing. Let's take advantage. That's what marketers do. How can we, there's an in. We can get that in with the consumer.
That's why I like the boring part of politics. That is the write a bill, let's change some legislature, let's actually make some things work and work for the people as opposed to the lip service and make people angry for no reason. Because that ends up being the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Right.
And we don't need more of that. We need actual change rather than people just getting upset over things they don't understand.
Right. And if they're good ideas, it doesn't matter whose it was. If it was a green idea, a red idea, or a blue idea. If it was a good idea and it benefits the people in New Brunswick, then we should all be working together. And I think that was one of the things I was most excited about when you look, if you happen to look on the legislative record and look at what was passed in this last session, the number of motions that came in that received either unanimous or voted assent, that we were able to get to a point where people said, yeah, it's a good idea, let's bring it forward. And I hope that continues. I hope that we can continue to find level playing fields and ground that is beneficial to the people in New Brunswick and not hammering it through because it's one party or another's good idea.
Yeah, partisanship is dangerous. Just towing the party line for the sake of towing the party line. Margaret, thank you. I appreciate this.
Oh, look, the problem with you and I is that we can go down half a dozen rabbit holes, and I am a person who has a brain that goes near. There's all sorts of train tracks, so my struggle is to keep focused on the agriculture and staying on one, because you're a lovely young man and you're very passionate about what you do, and I'm glad we have people on like you on side with agriculture, because I think young people need to have somebody that they can ask questions of, and I think your podcasts have been wonderful for that, and I always look forward to seeing what you have to say.
Thank you. I'm glad we actually had time to sit down and talk.
Yeah.
I think we've only ever had like 5 minutes tops to have a conversation.
It's always been fly by night, exactly.
Oh, let's go outside. Oh my goodness. It's so hot.
Are you sensing your presence?
Thank you for watching, and if you liked this episode, please consider subscribing and letting us know your comments on what you thought of this episode.